I never imagined that a simple weekend getaway to disconnect could turn into the worst nightmare of my life. In recent months, my routine had become unbearably stressful. Work at the office was becoming increasingly demanding, recently in the programming field, with tighter deadlines, endless meetings, and impossible expectations to meet. I felt suffocated by the pressure and monotony of the city. I've been in this field for over 5 years and haven't taken a vacation, focusing only on the money I could make. Every morning when I woke up, the feeling of exhaustion and fatigue seemed to intensify, as if I were trapped in a cycle that wouldn't let me breathe. Furthermore, there was a growing feeling of nostalgia inside me. Memories of my childhood, when I spent holidays at my grandparents' house in the countryside, came up frequently. I remember the peace I felt running through the fields, the smell of the trees, the quiet sound of the birds. It was as if those days had been taken from a dream that now seemed impossible to relive. I missed that simplicity, that welcoming silence that contrasted with the constant noise of the city. I needed a refuge, something that would bring me back to that feeling of tranquility and freedom that I so longed for. So one weekend, I decided I needed some time for myself. That was when I decided to look for an Airbnb that was far from the city. Here in Houston, we have plenty of options for houses on isolated farms or deep in the forest, and I rented a secluded cabin with great reviews. I thought it was exactly what I needed: a peaceful retreat, far from all distractions, an opportunity to reconnect with myself and maybe find a bit of the peace I was searching for. It was my first time doing something like this. Who knows, it might become the beginning of a new hobby. When I finally arrived at the cabin, I was overwhelmed by a sense of fulfillment that I hadn't felt in a long time. The path there was surrounded by tall, imposing trees, and as I moved along the narrow trail, I began to feel a gradual sense of relief. The surrounding landscape was breathtaking, with the sun setting behind the hills and painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I stopped the car for a moment to admire the view, taking a deep breath and trying to absorb all that tranquility. The cabin itself was small, but very cozy. It had a front porch with 2 rocking chairs that creaked slightly in the wind, a detail that made me smile as I thought of the stories I could hear sitting there, like the afternoons of my childhood. Inside, I found a well-decorated rustic space with a stone fireplace dominating the main room and large windows that let natural light illuminate every corner. There was a small equipped kitchen and a bedroom with a soft bed and sheets that gave off a light lavender scent. Everything seemed carefully prepared to provide comfort. For a moment, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The trees around me, the distant sound of the creek, and the comforting silence made me finally disconnect from all the hustle and bustle of the city. The feeling of nostalgia mixed with relief. It was as if I had returned to those childhood holidays, to the simplicity and peace I longed for. That first afternoon was wonderful. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset, feeling the cool breeze on my face, and hearing only the sound of nature around me. For the first time in a long time, I was at peace. After watching the sunset, I went into the cabin to prepare a simple dinner. The kitchen had everything I needed, and I started cooking while listening to the wind outside. It was a gentle wind, but strong enough to make the rocking chairs on the porch creak. That sound, which before seemed nostalgic, started to sound slightly disturbing as the night progressed. I tried to concentrate on dinner, but every time the creaking grew louder, I found myself looking at the door, feeling a shiver run down my spine. After eating, I decided to take a hot shower to try to relax. The hot water helped to relieve some of the accumulated tension, and the steam filling the bathroom brought me a sense of comfort. However, even there, the silence of the forest seemed to follow me, with occasional noises that came muffled through the bathroom door. I could hear the crackling of the trees, the distant sound of some animal, and occasionally the continuous creaking of the rocking chairs. I started to wonder if it was really just the wind. After the shower, I put on some comfortable pajamas and went to the living room. I lit the fireplace and sat in front of the fire, trying to enjoy the warmth and soft light. But as the night went on, the noises outside seemed to take on a life of their own. The crickets chirped, but there was something more. A sound of light footsteps on the porch caught my attention. I looked at the door, trying to listen more closely, but as soon as I focused my attention, the sound stopped. It was as if something was out there, moving only when I wasn't paying attention. Honestly, thinking about it, I laughed to myself, but it was a short laugh, interrupted by something even more disturbing. Whispers coming from outside the house. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but as I paid closer attention, I realized they were distinct voices from two people. They spoke in low tones, and I managed to catch a few loose phrases. They talked about how they were going to break into the house, about waiting for the right moment. My body froze, and I felt fear take over me. Without thinking twice, I grabbed my phone and called the police, trying my best not to make any noise. While speaking quietly with the dispatcher, I was already preparing to run if necessary. I moved slowly through the cabin, trying to avoid any noise that could alert whoever was out there. My mind worked frantically, imagining escape routes and places where I could hide until help arrived. While I was still trying to come up with a plan, a movement outside the window caught my attention. I turned my head slowly, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw one of the intruders standing there, looking directly into the house. His eyes met mine for an instant that felt like an eternity. Fear took over me, and without thinking twice, I ran towards the door, opening it abruptly and throwing myself out of the cabin. My only chance was the car parked nearby. I ran as fast as I could, feeling the cold air cut across my face as my feet pounded heavily on the ground. I reached the car, got in, and started trying to turn on the engine, my hands shaking and my heart pounding in my chest. That's when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the two hooded figures running towards me. Before I could do anything, one of them smashed the rear door window with a piece of wood. Shards of glass flew, and I felt despair consuming me. Finally, the engine caught. I floored the gas, not looking back. The sound of the hooded figure's screams faded away as I drove down the dirt road, trying to get as far away from that place as fast as possible. My entire body was trembling, and the fear was still there, but the relief of being in motion, of fleeing, gave me a spark of hope. I didn't know where I was going, but anywhere was better than that cabin. When I woke up, my head was pounding, and my mouth was as dry as sand. The throbbing pain behind my eyes made every movement a huge effort. I tried to remember where I was and how I had gotten there, but my memory was a tangle of disconnected flashes from the previous night. The last thing I clearly remembered was being at a bar with my friends, celebrating some reason that, at the moment, seemed a mystery. I was hungover, in an Airbnb I didn't recognize, and to make matters worse, I had no idea where I was, or how I ended up alone there. I looked around the room. The walls were made of light wood, and a small window let in light, illuminating a modest space. There was a messy bed, clothes scattered on the floor, and an empty water bottle on the bedside table. I got up slowly, still feeling dizzy. I looked for my phone, which I finally found in the pocket of the pants thrown in the corner of the room. No signal. My friends had disappeared, and I was completely lost. After a failed attempt to understand what had happened, I decided to explore the house. The living room was empty and silent, and an uncomfortable feeling of abandonment began to set in. I looked out the living room window, and all I could see was a dirt road surrounded by trees. I had no idea where I was. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized how isolated I seemed to be. With no cell signal and no way to contact anyone, it seemed like my friends had left me behind after a night of partying. Still trying to deal with the hangover, I decided to take a hot shower. The water helped me recover some energy, but the discomfort of not knowing where I was kept growing. After the shower, I got dressed and went to the kitchen. I found some leftover food that clearly wasn't mine and made a quick snack. I tried to convince myself that everything would be fine, that soon my friends would come back to pick me up, or at least send me a message explaining what had happened. After eating, I went back to the living room and threw myself on the couch. I found a bottle of wine in the kitchen and poured myself a glass, trying to relax while watching some random movie. But the feeling of discomfort seemed to increase as the night went on. The wind outside intensified, and the sound of breaking branches and rustling leaves seemed closer and closer, as if something or someone was approaching the house. It was then that I decided to explore the hallway that led to the other rooms of the cabin. I hadn't checked the whole house yet, and maybe that would help ease the feeling of being watched. I grabbed my phone and used the flashlight to illuminate the dark hallway. As I moved forward, I felt a shiver run through my body, as if something was wrong. The air seemed thicker, and my heart was pounding for no apparent reason. Suddenly, I saw something at the end of the hallway. A figure, or maybe several, was moving in the shadows. My eyes widened, and the wine glass I was holding fell to the floor, shattering into pieces. The figures seemed to have no faces, just distorted outlines, and they were moving slowly towards me. My body froze, and fear took over me in a way I had never experienced before. Before I could understand what I was seeing, I felt my legs give out, and everything went black. I woke up on the living room floor, my face pressed against the shards of the broken glass. I didn't know how much time had passed, but the house was plunged into an oppressive silence. My head was pounding even harder, and my body was trembling. The memory of the figures in the hallway hit me like a shock, and I felt the fear return in full force. I needed to get out of there immediately. I grabbed my keys from the table and ran towards the front door. I opened the door in a hurry, feeling the cold early morning wind hit my face. The fear that those figures were still there pushed me forward. I got into the car, and with trembling hands, I tried to start the engine. My eyes kept glancing back at the house, expecting to see something emerge from the darkness at any moment. When the engine finally started, I floored the accelerator. The tires skidded on the loose dirt before gaining traction, and I sped out of there. My heart was pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears, and the only thing running through my mind was to get away as fast as possible. I didn't care where I was going, as long as it was far from that cabin and the things I saw in the hallway.